Okay, looks like we're live. Well, welcome back to our object-oriented course, week 4. So the goal of this week, last week we looked at inheritance, which you can see in the little diagram on the screen. The idea here being that an employee is a type of person and a student is a type of a person. So ideally what you do is you create this parent class, and then you use the extends keyword to create a subclass. And these subclasses are really just a specialized version of the parent. So we did this in class using the employee class. So we created an abstract class called employee, and we created hourly employees that extend the employees. So what this means is an hourly employee is an employee. So they get all the attributes of the employee class, plus they have these specialized versions like hourly rate and the hours worked. Similarly, there's also this method called get paycheck. And we said here it's abstract, meaning when we define that particular paycheck item or method, we don't define how to implement it. So if you remember last week when we looked at our employees, if we go down to our method get paycheck, there's actually no code here. We just have a semicolon. We don't show how to implement this method in any way. What we're saying with this keyword abstract is the subclasses have to implement that. And so the hourly employee knows how to create their own paycheck because they have an hourly rate and they have the hours worked. So their paycheck is really hourly rate times hours worked. Similarly, on the other side of the screen, we have this idea that a commission employee is an employee. And they record monthly sales. Every time they make a sale, this goes up. And then at the end of the month, they take the commission rate times the monthly sales, and then they can create a paycheck, right? So it's a different system between the hourly employees and the commission employees. But both of them can share all these common attributes like first name, last name, social insurance number, etc. So today what we're going to do is we're going to try to show how do we connect this type of a concept in with a graphical user interface. And to do that, the easiest thing is to sort of look at, here I'm going to the Best Buy website. If I wanted to create a new account for a Best Buy, if I wanted to go buy some stuff at Best Buy, they want things like my first name, my last name, my email address, right? That's what they use to create a client in their system. Similarly, when we went to create last week an hourly employee, we needed things like first name, last name, social insurance number, date of birth, and their hourly rate. And we put it in this kind of a form like new hourly employee, and then we had to pass in all these attributes. Now, you can't expect your average user to be able to do that, and nor would you want them to. You want them to be able to interact with something nice and clean, much like this. This is a web form, but you could also have form on an application or inside of some kind of program. So this is what we're going to create today. To do that, we're going to use this model, view, and controller layout. And the idea is we've already created the model. These are our employee classes. So employee, hourly employee, and commissioned employee. That's the model. That's how the data should be structured. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a class called controller. It's also a class that will interact with that model. They'll be able to create new instances of the hourly employee class. The controller will also interact with something called view. And we're going to build the view in something called SceneBuilder. And SceneBuilder will create an XML document for us that delineates where everything goes on the screen. So this is what SceneBuilder looks like. In this one, this is my create employee view. We have a layout, a grid layout in the middle, and we're going to put in all these fields like first name, last name, and some text fields for them to enter in data. So if you do not have SceneBuilder yet, want you to go to Google, type in Java SceneBuilder download, and find it. Shouldn't be too hard to find or install. It goes in just like any other program. Once you've got it installed, finish watching this video. So here's what we want to do. We want to build the model, the view, and the controller. We've already built the model. So let's build the view next. And then what we'll do is we'll connect the controller with the view, and then we'll connect the controller with the model. So this one's done. Let's build the view. So to do that, I'm going to go into our project, and I'm going to say new, empty fxml, and I'm going to call this create employee view. I don't even need to go any further. I'm just going to call it create employee view. And I like to put in the word view here so that it's really obvious to me what it is I'm doing. Now you have a choice. You do not need to use a default controller. Personally, I like to, because what this does is it really separates the concerns and puts all of the view logic in one spot. It puts all of the model or our employee logic in one spot, and then controlling the view all goes within this class called the controller. If your company had particular style that they wanted to consistently put across all of your pages or scenes, as it's called in FXML, you can use cascading style sheets here, CSS, and you just literally have to select this button. If your company already had one, you'd say use existing, and you'd browse to your CSS file. Makes it really easy to have a consistent look and feel across all your pages. But we're not going to do that today. We're going to save that for future lessons. So let's say finish. Okay, and here you can see it created an XML document for us. And make it a little bigger. Okay, so it's just XML. They call it FXML because it's Java FX, but there's not much to it at this point in time. So I'm going to close that. And then it also created a controller class for us. And again, there's not much in here. Not yet. So let's go projects. Now, if I double click on this now, it'll actually launch SceneBuilder for me. And here in SceneBuilder, you can see on the left-hand side are things called containers. There's a hierarchy. The hierarchy is basically the layers within this window here. Pull this down a little. And then we have a lot of controls. So these are the things that you're going to think of the most when things that you typically interact with: buttons, checkboxes, date pickers, HTML editors, all these things, right? Like you can just drag them in, and all of a sudden you get like a nice editor that you can use. Right? It's pretty slick. Okay, so when we're putting these items on the screen, we can just put them on any old place, right? And it'll if we go to layout, it'll say, well, that's position 183 by 132, and this one's 119 by 49. But it's actually kind of hard when you do lay things out this way to get a consistent look and feel, consistent spacing. If I want these to all be in here, but you'll quickly find that it's hard to get spacing consistent all the way through, and then you have alignment. So what's nice is to use these containers. And what these containers do is they actually have a lot of default personalities built right into them. So you don't have to mess around too much. So for example, the border pane, I can choose the top, the sides, the bottom, the flow plane, just put flow pane, literally, as you drag elements in, it just puts them one after another. In this case, what I want is a grid. So I'm going to bring in the grid pane. And then I can put my labels, drag them right in here. So labels are they're just simple text items. They're not interactive. They just display text. Where did my labels go? There we go. And if I want to add more rows to my grid, just add some rows below. And if I want to change maybe the font size of all these, because I'm not using a CSS, I can go into properties. I can change them all at once. I'm multi-selected holding down the control key, and I can make all the same size. And then I can go to one at a time, and I can say things like first name, last name, social insurance number, date of birth, and the last was hourly rate. And if there isn't enough space, it chops off letters and puts in ... So let's just take our corner, drag it out so it's got lots of space. Now I need fields that I can interact with. These ones just display text. Now I want to be able to enter text. So I'm going to go down here and find a text field. Just copy and paste. Now, because dates are really quite sophisticated things, and there's a lot of ways that people represent dates, it's a lot easier to use a date picker than allow the user to actually enter a date. And this really controls what they can do, which is fantastic. Okay, so we've got all of these things, and we can add in prompt text. So like here, I could say this is where your first name goes, where your last name goes, and your social insurance number goes here. And the hourly rate goes here. Okay, and well, that's our date of birth. All right, so now it's starting to look like something, doesn't it? Last thing we need is a button, sort of like the go button here. And this is to create a new employee. Drag it so it lines up. And then we'll just make our window sized a bit better. Excellent. And then I have to hit save. So now let's go back over to our controller class. And the controller, what we have to do is hook it up so that it can interact with that fxml file. So the way we do that is we say at fxml, and we create some private instance variables. So I'm going to say text field. Okay, so again, it doesn't know by default these classes. So I'm going to make sure to take the fxml class, and then you see text fields. There's different versions of text fields. AWT and Swing are older packages in Java. We want everything we're going to do is really with this JavaFX package. So make sure you get the JavaFX one. Okay. And just do 4 of these. So I'm going to put a few in like this. Take some time. And lastly, here's our hourly rate. And then we have a date picker. There we go. There's only one option. So we got our date picker. And we had our button. Now again, be careful because there's the AWT version and there's JavaFX version. We want the JavaFX version. Okay. So now we're going to hook up. So here in our controller, we now have all these instance variables. Okay. So when we create an instance of this controller class, we're going to have access to all of these. So make sure you hit save. I'm going to go back into SceneBuilder now. And when I click on my field, if I go down to code, here I can, so that's the first name. So I'm going to say that's the first name text field. And then the next one here is last name text field. And social insurance text field. And the hourly rate. Date of birth. And our button. Okay. So now, when it creates the fxml document, it's actually linked these text fields and buttons and date pickers back to our controller. And if we go into it from this view, if I right-click on my view and say edit, I can actually see that XML file now has actually got a lot of content in it. We can see our anchor pane, right? So that's right up here in the hierarchy. And the anchor pane has a grid pane. Inside the grid pane, we have all these different children, like, labels for first name, last name, social insurance number. We have text fields, right? So you can see all of these, and they have IDs. ID equals first name text field. See how it's exactly the same now as what we've written in here. So it's linking them all together for us. Fantastic. Okay, so someone fills in the field. We can even do a preview here. So someone fills in these fields and then hits create new employee. Well, what do we want to happen when that button's picked? And actually, let's see here. Let's make this just a little bit narrower and a little bit taller. So it looks a little nicer. Okay, so what do we want to do? Well, if the button's pushed, we're going to need a method to handle that. So I'm going to say this. Okay, so public print type, and I'll say create employee button pushed. Okay, that's what's happening. So that's the name of our method. And then we can go back to SceneBuilder. I can actually wire this up. So I click on my button, go into the code for the button, and it says here on action, run this method. Save. So if someone pushes that, now it's going to call our method. Go back to our controller. So in here, we want to now create a new hourly employee, right? So this is basically to create a new hourly employee is the same as this, right? We're going to say new hourly employee, first name, last name, social insurance number. So let's go into our controller here and we'll say, okay, fine, hourly employee. And we'll call it the new employee equals new hourly employee. But instead of hard coding in the name, now I can say first name text field text. Okay, so it's going to give us the information from whatever the user typed in, and I can do the same with the last name. And I'll do the same with the social insurance number. I can do the same with our date picker. So I can say date of birth, date picker. That one uses get value instead of get the text. And then the last one we have here is the hourly rate. Okay. So there you have it. We have first name, last name, social insurance number, the date they're born, and their hourly rate. But it's complaining. If I go over here, it says we have incompatible types. A string cannot be converted to an integer. And that's because these boxes are text fields. They hold text, not numbers. So what do I mean by that? If we typed in a social insurance number like 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a string, okay? But in our employee class, when we created a new employee, we said that that's going to be type integer, not type string. Remember, anything inside those quotes is a string. So what we need to do is we need to convert this into the number 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, this is an integer, okay? So the integer class actually has a mechanism to do this. It will validate that these are all numbers and then create a number for us. So we don't have to figure out how to do it. We can just call the integer class, take parse the integer, okay. That takes a string. Let's just make this a hint smaller. So it takes this string value and it's going to create it into a number just like this. Okay, now we got a new problem. This one says incompatible types strings cannot be converted to double. So much the same problem, except instead of an integer, it's a double. So I'm going to say parse double. And we'll add in here. Good. So now we have a valid hourly employee. And we'll just print him to the console to prove to ourselves that he works. So the new employee is a new employee. Right. Last week we created a two-string method, so we'll just call that. It'll print out their name. All right, we are flying through this GUI creation here. So let's go back. This is what we talked about. We have the idea of a view, which we've now created. We have the idea of a controller, which we've created, and we already had the model. But if I go back up here, I needed something to launch this whole view controller model setup. So we need our actual program to call upon this view controller combo. So I'm going to create a new class to do that. I'm going to say projects, new Java class, and I'm going to say launch employee view. Okay, so I'm going to launch this view. And you remember when we created our hourly employee, we said it extends the employee class. Okay, so if you remember that, we said an hourly employee extends an employee. So it's a specialized version of an employee. And as part of that, it had to implement all the abstract classes. So these are abstract methods, my apologies. So an employee class, here we have an abstract method called getPaycheck. There's no contents. By using the keyword abstract, it's forcing the subclass to implement how this method should run. So we're going to have the same thing here. I'm going to create a specialized version of an application. So I'm going to say extend class application. And we'll import JavaFX application. And then we're going to implement all the abstract methods. And the abstract method we need is called start. Okay. So, and with any program, we need a main method to launch things. So I'm going to say public static void main string. When you say launch args, this launch is a method within the application class, and it will essentially come down to the start method that we have to implement. So what do we want to put in here? In here, we're going to use something called an fxml loader. I'm just going to call this thing the loader. And this will be used to load in our view. Oops. I want to set the location. And in here, I'm going to say get class back to our class, and then we're going to say get the resource. And this allows us to load up our create employee view.fxml document. And then remember, I talked about here when we were looking at the fxml, it's all within this anchor pane, right? That's our parent within this view, okay? So here, I'm going to say anchor pane and create employee out loader, okay? And one of its methods is to load. So it'll get this resource and load it. And so now that we have an anchor pane, we're also going to need a scene. So the way that this works is they've kind of chosen the same language you might expect at a Broadway play. So picture you're in New York and you're looking at a great Broadway play. What's a popular one now? I don't know. Hamilton. Hamilton's a very popular one right now. So you're looking at the stage. So that's what this is. It's the primary stage. And then throughout the play, you're going to have different scenes. So the idea is a stage is sort of the same as a new scene, and we'll use the create employee layout for that scene. And so you can sort of think of like Act 1, Scene 2, Act 1, Scene 3, right? Like different scenes. So we could have many different scenes play in our primary stage. Okay, this particular one is for creating new employees. And then I'm going to say primary stage, set scene. It assumes the only scene we have. And then I'm going to give it a title. Say create new employee. And right now, for example, if I go to my preview, see how the title here is create employee view.fxml? You don't usually see that type of thing as a title. You might not even see this icon. We could change that too, but we're not going to do that today. So I'm just going to change that to create new employee. And then we're going to say primary stage. So this will launch our primary stage. So if all goes well, I'm going to say run this file. Beautiful. So here's our great little viewer. So we type in Fred Flintstone, the old social insurance numbers 4. Let's go back in time. Looks like January 15th, 3:55 per hour. I say create employee. Fantastic. We have a new employee. Now you see it didn't clear any of the fields or go back to any other window because we haven't created any of that yet. We haven't created that type of logic, which is actually kind of great because now I can test some other scenarios. So what happens if remember our employees have to be between 14 and 90 years old. So if I create an employee that's, say, I don't know, born a couple of years ago, this should throw an exception, right? We don't want to create an employee that is, in this case, 2 years old. So I'll create new employee. Boom, it blows up. Now, if you were using a program and it blew up like this, you'd be pretty upset. You'd be like, wow, man, the whole thing really crashed. But this stuff's for developers, people like you and I. So let's go down and see at the bottom here. This whole error was caused by an illegal argument exception, and the message was, sorry, applicants must be 14 to 90 years old. Great message. Unfortunately, it caused our program to stop running. So what can we do about that? Well, I want to tell my user that they had an invalid entry, but I want to do it in a controlled way without blowing up the program. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger. And let's pull in another label here. And just so that we can see it, I'm going to call this the error message. Okay. Oops, hit save. Go back to our controller class, and let's add in at XML private label, because that was a label. They're not going to interact with it. They just have to be able to read it. And we'll add in our imports. Again, make sure you take the FX one, not the AWT one. Go back to SceneBuilder, click on the code. I didn't hit save. Now I can give this an error message label. Save. Okay, so right now, when the initialize method is run, which happens automatically, it doesn't initialize anything, but we can say error message label initially text to have no value. Okay, it's just a blank. It's a blank screen. And since our users could blow up our application, let's put this inside of a try catch block. So I'll say try creating an hourly employee. If it's successful, print them to the screen. If it's unsuccessful, catch that illegal argument exception. Call it E. Okay, so that's my variable name is E. And here I'm going to say error message label, set the text, E, right? So whatever our exception was, get the message. Hit save. All right, let's try launching our application again. So I'm going to go run file. Now if I say Fred Flintstone, date of birth was last year, create new employee. Here, instead of blowing up now, because it's inside that try catch block, I can see, sorry, applicants must be 14 to 90 years old. So it caught the error. It didn't blow up our application. It allows us to go, oh, darn it, I got the wrong year. And now I can pick a correct year, create my new employee, and voila. All right. Hope you enjoyed this week's session. Next week, we're going to continue with this metaphor. We're going to add some more functionality to our GUI. Have a great week.